Okie dokie, excuse me while I scroll to the top. All right. If you haven't seen any of the videos that I put together, my perspective on things is really just to try to help educate folks. I don't necessarily have all the answers, but I think I have quite a few answers, and educating people, I think, gives everybody the better tools that they can use to make better decisions. In the world of COVID-19, I think even the medical professionals don't really know. They don't fully understand. We're still gathering information as they openly admit. But some things I do think we have information on, and we're led down a certain path of assumptions and inferences, and I don't think that's acceptable because some things could be putting us at harm or at risk for doing ourselves harm. So my goal is to inform the public, in this case, about ivermectin and its use in COVID-19. As you'll see, I'm just going to read most of the document to you, so you're welcome to mute my voice and just read along with it. But I don't think personally, I don't think the media, the medical correspondents, or physicians and researchers are being open and honest about the ivermectin. I think there's plenty of data out there, and I think they're capable of interpreting the data, but I don't think they're doing it. As if they say something that you disagree with, you might not have confidence in them, or you might not watch their TV show. But what they don't realize is that leaving us uninformed or underinformed is not acceptable. It's been over a year that we've seen this disease, and we, the people, seem to have just as little concrete information now as we did even when this started. So I'm going to do my best. You can check out my YouTube channel, Silence Do Good. Just go ahead and type that in the search, and you should find the channel. Then just find some videos that you might want to watch. Not just things on COVID. I got another one on there for type 2 diabetes. Hey, by the way, are you type 2 diabetic, or you know somebody's type 2 diabetic? If your doctor hasn't told you, you don't actually have to be type 2 diabetic. You can change your lifestyle. And of course, they say, oh, lose weight and exercise. Well, I describe a little bit more about what goes on, and then also a little bit better on how to get yourself out of that predicament. And one of the biggest things is don't drink anything but water in between meals. Eat 3 meals a day, but don't drink anything but water in between meals, because it turns out that even artificially flavored, artificially sweetened beverages, the artificial sweetener can cause insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes. So drinking anything with sugar in it, drinking anything that is artificially sweetened could spike your insulin and drive that resistance the wrong direction. So if you don't want to be a diabetic, a type 2 diabetic, which most human beings are, if you don't want to be a type 2 diabetic, you can have whatever you want with your meals, eat 3 meals a day, no snacks in between, and also no artificially sweetened beverages. And if you think, well, what am I supposed to do there, smarty pants, if I feel like my blood sugar is low? Well, then go buy a glucometer, prick your finger, and I guarantee your blood sugar won't be low, because you're a diabetic. That means your blood sugar is too high. So, but prick your finger, that way you know for sure. So when your doctor says, if you feel like your blood sugar is low, just have a little Snickers bar or something like that. Yeah, well, prick your finger first, because if your blood sugar is not low, then eating that candy, eating that sugar, eating that sweetened thing is actually going to spike your insulin more and drive your type 2 diabetes farther the wrong direction. So anyway, that's the short answer of that, even though it's like a 20 or 30-minute video, but it gives a lot of other good details. So anyhow, back to what we're talking about, ivermectin. Below, I'm going to point out a review on ivermectin. Always be careful reading reviews, anything called review or review in the title. They are just the author's opinion, supported by articles of their choosing. They're not obliged to document evidence against their opinion. This is not a research study. It's not a scientific study. It's just somebody putting some articles together to say, hey, you know what I think? I think that this works because of this. And then they're just choosing some articles. Alone reviews are not objective. They're subjective. And then just like one author can write a review in support of something, another could write an argument against the opposite, and neither would be more valid than the other, because they're selecting and handpicking articles that would support their view and avoiding ones that argue against their view. So that's pretty shifty in my opinion, but that's the way review articles work. So I'm going to be looking at the second paragraph here. I'm going to break down a particular part of it where it says, recently, evidence has emerged that the oral antiparasitic agent ivermectin exhibits numerous antiviral and anti-inflammatory mechanisms, with trial results reporting significant outcome benefits. So if you heard somebody say that, you'd go, wow, that sounds great, because it has numerous mechanisms, significant outcome benefits. Yeah, and there's evidence. That's great. Let me break that down for you, because words have meaning, and you have to be very careful how somebody says words, what they are implying, and what you are inferring. If you don't know what that means, then go look those up in the dictionary, because what they're implying might not be a truth or a fact. It might be something that they believe in, but they don't have evidence behind it. To then infer something from that means that you are thinking one direction. You're thinking, oh, they must mean this, and that is not necessarily going to be the truth or a fact. So when they say evidence has emerged, the evidence emerging is looking at controlled studies on a petri dish. So any evidence that we have so far is not in a living human being. This is not really evidence in real life therapy. So when they say evidence has emerged, yes, they have data collected from working with ivermectin and COVID-19 on human cells in a petri dish. Okay, so don't balloon this up and think that, oh, they've got some sort of substantial evidence to prove something. No, that's all they're saying. They looked at controlled studies, because this is just a review. They looked at somebody else's studies, and they have some data on petri dishes. They say that ivermectin, yeah, great, but they don't imply what concentration that they're talking about. They said evidence has emerged that the oral antiparasitic agent. So what are they implying? That ivermectin, an antiparasitic agent, exhibits effects. Yes, but they didn't specifically state that the antiparasitic dose has any effect on the virus or any anti-inflammatory mechanisms. But you might infer that. So you might think that, but that's not actually the case. So you don't know what the concentration is, but I can guarantee you, and I'm going to show you, that the dose that they're talking about in these petri dish studies are not safe doses. They are not the doses meant for parasites, parasite control. They're talking about doses that also killed human cells in the petri dish. Okay, so when they say, oh, ivermectin has antiviral effects, yes. But what they don't tell you in that sentence is, oh, hey, by the way, it also killed the human cells in the petri dish. So that should raise a red flag, and you should go, oh, crap. Yeah, one sentence made us believe one thing, but you'd have to read the journal articles that this person is citing in this review. A trial. A trial is not a double-blinded research study. It's not a published study. Next, he'll say, some have not passed peer review. It's because trials aren't controlled. We can't compare apples to apples when some people would be getting ivermectin alone or with an antibiotic, and others would be getting 4 or 5 different additional therapies. So when they say significant outcome benefits, is a very nice use of words, but infer with caution. Significant because statistically in the lab, the ivermectin affected the virus. Not significant meaning that it's going to potentially do something significant for us. Outcome. What is the outcome you believe they're talking about? Survival of a human life? Less suffering of the human life? Wrong. The outcome that they're talking about is less virus present on a petri dish. Significant outcome benefits. Benefits, again, a great word to help you infer. Ivermectin will have a benefit at all, namely on the alive human. But in this sentence, it still remains vague. And none of these relate to studies done in vivo, meaning in the real life living human being in a controlled setting. So here's where the rubber meets the road, and why no one can say for certain if any effect is truly seen with ivermectin. Because what we're seeing now is the use of steroids and antibiotics and other drugs, along with ivermectin or without ivermectin. We're seeing that use in most of our moderate to severe cases. So making a link to people receiving just steroids or just antibiotics or both and ivermectin or not ivermectin, you're not going to be able to make a connection. So what they plan to use is a meta-analysis. What are those? It's where you take a bunch of data from these studies, from trials, with controls, without controls, put it all into a computer, see if any connections can be made between the data points. Basically, it's like writing a review. You take the data that you want, but you're not bound by any law or any principle to use all data, good data, bad data, supportive data, or opposing data. You can use whatever you want for comparison, which would exemplify the answer that you wish to demonstrate. It's still potentially biased, just like writing a review, depending on what the author wants to sell you. For example, if you take all the data that we have currently and you analyze it, you'll find that more people were hospitalized, suffered, and died before we started giving everyone antibiotics and steroids. Using a meta-analysis, you can see a good correlation with proper medical therapy and control of secondary bacterial infections and systemic inflammation, and the reduction in hospitalization, suffering, and death. We know that steroids and antibiotics are a good idea in moderate to severe cases thanks to that meta-analysis. So we took the data and we said, all right, so what can we make a correlation to here? Excuse me one second. What can we make a correlation with? Well, if you put all the data together, you'd find that when we started using antibiotics and steroids, people got less sick. Well, doesn't that seem kind of obvious from the get-go? Like, if I had inflammation in my lungs, shouldn't I have an anti-inflammatory like a steroid? If I had a secondary infection in my bloodstream or somewhere else, if I had sepsis, don't you think I should get an antibiotic? But we weren't getting those things, okay? So people suffered and died due to poor medical management of secondary bacterial infections and systemic inflammation. But using a meta-analysis, well, yeah, I mean, that seems to point out, yeah, antibiotics and steroids are good, but there are just too many variables now to wonder if something little like ivermectin would actually have any benefit. So, by the way, did I mention, I did in previous videos, but not in this one, I have a master's degree in micro and molecular biology and a doctorate in veterinary medicine. So I'm not just spitballing opinions over here. These are cold, hard, undeniable facts. Now it's time to get nerdy and dirty. Basic chemistry. Now I'm going to show you why ivermectin is not having an effect. So we can kind of all put it by the wayside and move on with our lives. And that strongly affects me because I do need ivermectin to treat my patients, and it's getting a little bit harder to get because where it's made, it's being used very readily in the human population. So what I'm about to talk about is basic chemistry. You're welcome to look things up if you think I'm speaking out of line, but for the most part, you're just along for the ride. So I'll get you up to speed, and I'll have to give you some basic definitions along the way, but you'll see what their use is in a moment. Molecular structure of ivermectin. C48H74O14. That's 48 carbons, 74 hydrogens, 14 oxygens. Here's a definition for you. A mole in chemistry is used to define an amount of an atom or a substance. We use it to create a way to compare different compounds, which would be otherwise very difficult to do given the small size and weight of individual atoms. 1 mole of carbon is 12 grams, 1 mole of hydrogen is 1 gram, 1 mole of oxygen is 16 grams. So if we have, what do we say, 48 of those, 74 of those, and 14 of those, we take those 12 times 48, 1 times 74, 16 times 14, is that correct? Yes. Apologize for that. And then you get ivermectin, its weight is going to be 874 grams per mole. All right, that's just basic chemistry stuff. You're just going to have to accept that is true. If you don't think it's true, well, go ahead and look it up, and you'll see it. It is, in fact, true. So now here's an article on the use of ivermectin cited in the review that I talked about before, and looking at the concentration and how that affected the virus in the study. So this paper, sorry, I'll scroll up so you can see it's in the Journal of Virology, September of 2020, so a relatively recent paper. I was looking at human adenovirus. I realized that that is not the SARS-CoV-2 virus, but this is an early article just looking at how ivermectin might be affecting this virus as well. The paper cites concentrations of 1 micromolar. Micromolar is a microgram per liter in a volume solution. How the concentrations of 1 micromolar to 10 micromolar have shown effects on human cells and on a human virus line. Very important. Words have meaning. I said on human cells and on the human virus line. Okay, that means ivermectin adversely affects human cells at those concentrations too. They actually proved that in this study. Less than 1 micromolar was not reported because it is not effective. So their studies worked on 1 micromolar, 5 micromolar, and 10 micromolar. They noted 10 micromolar kills half the cells on the petri dish. 10 micromolar of ivermectin kills half the cells on the petri dish. Half the human cells on the petri dish. So, are you going to be giving somebody a solution that will make their blood 10 micromolar solution final concentration in their bloodstream? No, because you'd be killing half the cells in the human body. So is that going to be okay? No. So we're going to assume that no one's stupid enough to prescribe you enough ivermectin to do that. No matter how effective it might be on a petri dish, you don't want to do that. Okay? From the above information, so we're looking to make a 1 or 10 micromolar solution. Ivermectin is 874 grams per mole. To make a micromolar solution, you take 874 grams per mole, you multiply it times 10 to the minus 6 moles. I apologize, I could have superscripted that. Per liter. Okay, and then that would give you ultimately 0.874 times 10 negative third grams per liter, which is 0.874 milligrams per liter, which is 1 micromolar of ivermectin. Okay, so if you want a 10 micromolar, then it would be 8.74 milligrams per liter of volume. All right, so that's what we're looking at. So again, 10 is going to kill half your cells, so I'm going to focus more on the 0.874 milligrams per liter. So in order to make a liter of liquid into 1 micromolar, you have to add 0.874 milligrams. Make sense? Right? Okay, so 0.874 milligrams into 1 liter is 1 micromolar. Roughly this 70 kilogram human is about 40 liters of fluid, some in the intracellular compartment, some in the extracellular compartment. And so 40 liters times 0.874 milligrams per liter, that would be 35 milligrams. 350 milligrams, if you're talking about 10 micromolar would also cause half of your cells to die, so you don't want that as well, right? So don't self-medicate. Should be a hyphen in there. But that equals 35 to 350 milligrams of ivermectin. So here is the data. All right, again, they use 1, 5, and 10 micromolar. This is the viral titer, meaning how much virus is left. You have this is a log scale, so this is 1 times 10 to the 9th, so 1 billion, okay, viral particles. And then this is 100 million. So, you understand how log works? It's for every 1 log, that's a 10. So this is 7 zeros, 1 plus 7 zeros, 1 plus 8 zeros, 1 plus 9 zeros. Okay, so in case, I hope that's clear enough, but if you're not math orientated, that's what it is on a log scale. So this is 10 times less, this is 10 times less. So from 9 to 7, that's 100 times less. Okay, that's how that works. 10 micromolar, you're killing 50% of the cells. How do we know that? In C here, the RFU is standing for a fluorescence that they use to look at the viability or how alive the cells are in the culture itself, not treated with virus. These are just the cells in the petri dish. When they use 10 micromolar, you see that you went from 30,000 down to approximately 12.5 to 15,000. So you've killed half the cells 10 micromolar. You don't want to do that. Okay, 5 micromolar, you are still on this curve and you are still killing. 0.01 and 0.1, you can see it's flat, right? Because we're not affecting those cells. But look at it start to dunk a little bit. Look at the error bars here, okay? The deviation bars on that dot, which means on some of the trials, we were, in fact, killing quite a few. So 1 micromolar actually does have, of ivermectin alone, no viruses, ivermectin alone at 1 micromolar can kill these cells. By the way, do you know what kind of cells these are? These are cancer cells. Cancer cells that don't have a stop button. They just kind of keep on growing. So if you can kill a cancer cell with ivermectin, well, hey, that might be a whole different scenario of a therapeutic, but you don't want to be taking this stuff orally and then having it just start randomly killing your own cells, okay? So there you go. Figure 1C, 10 micromolar, 50% of the cells are dying. No virus in there, just the human cells. So you can't do that, so don't self-medicate. So then you would assume they recommend the 1 micromolar concentration, but you notice that nobody is taking a stand and giving a final verdict because at 1 micromolar, that deviation there, you are actually killing the cells as well. So 1 micromolar does have some effect on your own natural healthy tissues and would kill them as well. So then just a little bit more, figure 1b shows that 1 micromolar resulted in less than 10-fold reduction in virus. So 1 micromolar from 9 to 8 would be 10 times less virus. You didn't even achieve 10 times less. So of the virus itself. So while you've had a reduction, do not think for a second that this is really reducing very much. You get infected by 1 SARS-CoV-2 virus particle, and that thing will make tens and hundreds and thousands. And when that goes out of your cell and invades the next cell, then those each will make tens and hundreds and thousands. So 1 becomes 100, becomes 10,000, becomes a million. I mean, this is propagation at its best. So if you're reducing it by less than tenfold, by using this, you're not really making much of a dent either. But remember, at 1 micromolar final concentration, it will kill your cells too. So, let's see, that's just kind of reiterating the same thing. If you have 1 million virus particles, you're going to reduce it to still more than 100,000 virus particles. So that's not that profound considering how many viruses you're creating. So is ivermectin really the golden bullet for treating COVID? Nope. They know that it isn't. But they're not going to tell you that because you don't want to hear that, and you might go get your news someplace else. And remember, at that dose, it's still only killing the cells in the petri dish, so killing the cells inside of you would be doing the same thing, so don't do that. Not a painful enough kick in the groin? You really think ivermectin is the thing? Well, here's another study, this time using actually the SARS-CoV-2. So here is, zoom in on this a little bit for you. Okay, so here's 1 micromolar. There's 10, 5 somewhere in between, right? 1 micromolar looks like it might not actually be affecting the SARS-CoV-2 COVID-19 virus at 1 micromolar. Go higher, let's take a step back. 1 micromolar, remember, it is killing some of your cells in the previous study. And then go any higher, and then you're going to start killing your cells as well. Oh yeah, sure, great. You're reducing some of the virus, but you're also killing your cells at the same time. So same thing with the other genes that they're specifically looking at. 1 micromolar might be a little dip here in that gene, not much in that gene, slightly bit in that gene, and then you still have to go in higher concentration to actually reduce the gene expression. So, but you can't do that because 1 micromolar already kills your cells. So what are you supposed to do? Take 5 micromolar? Instead of killing 50% of your cells, you want to do what? Kill 25% of your cells? 5 micromolar, also not good. Don't self-medicate. A little bit more information for you. Told you we're gonna get nerdy here. Standard dose for human parasitic disease is up to 0.2 milligrams per kilogram. That would be about 14 milligrams for parasitic infection and about a 70 kilogram human being. Therefore, according to the research out there on a petri dish, not in a human, what they're talking about, remember me saying the 0.874 milligrams per liter in order to make your body that 1 micromolar? You'd have to have at least 35 milligrams. So you're talking about 2.5 to even 25 times the normal dose could be required. Not that it would if it was going to be effective at all in the real life patient, right? But we already said 1 micromolar is not good, and that ivermectin will kill your cells. So don't dose yourself. It could be lethal. Are you still not dissuaded? Are you still hopeful? Okay. So then let's assume that every milligram that you take in orally gets absorbed and distributed throughout the body equally and evenly. That's not the case, never the case, not with any and all drugs. Here's a study on stromectol, apologize for that, ivermectin tablet, 12 milligrams given orally. At 4 hours after oral administration, they saw 30 and 46, 2 different studies, nanograms per milliliter, not milligrams, nanograms per milliliter. Converted, that is 0.03 and 0.046 milligrams per milliliter at 4 hours. So we had just said that 1 micromolar concentration in the blood, right? In the blood of a human, in a 70-pound or 70 kilogram human, be approximately 160-pound or so human being. In order to have 1 micromolar throughout the body's tissues, you'd have to have 0.874 milligrams per liter. But a 12 milligram tablet only gave us 0.03 to 0.046. That's 20 to almost 30 times too low in taking the standard dose for parasites. Remember when I originally said, that article by Dr. Corey said this anti-parasitic, and it makes you want to infer that, oh, I just got to take the parasitic amount, that number of milligrams. No, you'd be way too low when you compare it to what dose you would have to have in your bloodstream circulating the whole time in order to be therapeutic, according to that petri dish study. All right, so you are not a petri dish, so standard doses are not going to be high enough to be effective, so don't self-medicate. As I said, 0.874 to make 1 micromolar blood concentration is more than 29 times the anti-parasitic dose. The FDA has shown Mectin, put a T in there real quick, boink, there we go. Ivermectin is teratogenic at doses higher than the anti-parasitic dose. What does that mean? Teratogenic means it can cause cancer. Ivermectin can cause cancer. Let me ask you this. Have you seen the ranitidine lawsuit commercials? Did you take ranitidine and suffer from? And then they list about every major nasty cancer in human beings. Ranitidine is an antacid. It replaced cimetidine, which was Tagamet, which worked really, really great as an antacid, but you had to take it 3 times a day. Ranitidine came along as a twice a day because cimetidine went off patent. And now here we are over a decade later, and they're making a connection between all these types of cancers and taking an antacid. So I get it. People around the globe have taken ivermectin, but not at the higher doses than recommended, just at basic anti-parasitic doses, and that is the safe dose, okay? But certainly not at the doses that Dr. Corey and the ivermectin promoter suggest could be effective. They're talking about petri dishes. They're not talking about in real life human beings. They're not talking about giving this to humans and saying this already works. No, it's all on petri dishes, on cancer cells in petri dishes that they can infect at will, that they can modify or do anything they want to. You have to be very, very cautious how you interpret and how you infer what the meaning of their data is. So remember, 0.874 milligrams per liter in your blood concentration would kill some of your own healthy cells. The higher you go, the more cells die. Bottom line is you're not going to safely get enough oral milligrams to achieve a dose that affects the virus in your body the way it did on a petri dish. In vitro petri dish is not in vivo in the living patient. So don't self-medicate. All right, want more? I got more. Ivermectin, teratogenic. I said that means it causes cancer. In mice, rats, and rabbits, 0.2, 8.1, and 4.5 times the max recommended human dose, respectively, cause cancer in these animals. Be careful out there, folks. Look, I like the banter and the hope for prevention or faster cure for any and all diseases, but this data is already out there. We already know that it is not, look, drugs are not safe. Drugs are dirty. So yeah, they might have a good job to do, but you have to be really careful about how you're dosing and how your physician is dosing you. So some of this information has been established for decades, but nobody's stepping up right now to say definitively it is or is not effective at current doses, and isn't saying that it is safe at higher doses. So they're not telling us anything other than, oh yeah, well, this might have some effect. Yep, it does. It does have some effect on a petri dish, but you can't achieve those levels safely in the bloodstream of human beings. So in conclusions, in the lab, might be doing something, but in real life, you would kill the person at the same doses you use in the lab. Ivermectin is not curing COVID. At the anti-parasitic dose, it's doing nothing at all. They've shown that because you're less than 1 micromolar, and on their graphs, they're not seeing any reduction in gene expression. So it's not doing anything at all at the anti-parasitic dose. Could you be prescribed the anti-parasitic dose just in case? Yeah, sure, you could, but it wouldn't do anything. There's no research to prove otherwise. We only have research that shows doses at 1 micromolar or higher will kill human cells. Doses at 1 micromolar or higher could affect the virus, but you can't achieve that in the bloodstream safely. So there is no effect on viruses at lower concentrations, and that's why they didn't use less than 1 micromolar in the studies. So the world needs to know these facts and all the BS about how so-and-so got better in a day with ivermectin, and oh, well, he had monoclonal antibodies and steroids and antibiotics. Well, you're not comparing apples to apples or apples to oranges. You're comparing apples to a desk lamp. A year ago, nobody got anything but a tube and oxygen, no matter how severe or mild the case was. No antibiotics, no steroids. It wasn't the ventilator killing people. It was secondary infections that were left untreated. That's the fact, Jack. I don't care what anybody has to say. That is not opinion. I wonder if I even talk about it in here, but I might. If I forget to, then I'll maybe blab on it for a minute too. But now everybody gets something. Get a Z-Pack, get some steroids, get both. Those who can afford it, get monoclonal antibodies, get antivirals. Yeah, sure. You add ivermectin or shoe polish or Granny's Magic Wonder Dust, and you're going to see a difference between 2020 cases and current cases and how they're resolving because of the steroids and antibiotics that they get now. Not the ivermectin. I can assure you of that. Math never lies. You can't safely get the blood concentration high enough for ivermectin to be effective. Case closed. Don't self-medicate. What's that you say? You're not done? There's a study in India with some thousands of people prophylactically using ivermectin and some thousands using it for therapy, and a report says it showed something? Okay, Let me give you a lesson in anatomy and physiology, followed up by the proper way that research should be done. The human nose, mouth, and lungs have bacteria in them, and they live there naturally. We call it microflora. They're supposed to be there, and they can often protect us from really bad bugs, just like our natural skin bacteria. So when all this started and they said, wash your hands, everybody wash your hands, and then so many people had red, rashy, raw hands, and then everybody said, oh, well, this is too much. I'm honestly hurting myself. And they said, okay, don't wash your hands that much. What in God's green earth were they telling you that for? Physicians shouldn't have been telling you, scrub your hands like crazy. You're getting rid of your natural skin bacteria. That's your stuff that protects you from the bad bugs. During any respiratory infection, those naturally occurring bacteria can become secondary pathogens. Why is that? During COVID or any viral disease that is affecting, any viral disease, even if it's not respiratory, the virus invades your cells. To make the virus or to get the virus out, you either have to rupture the cell. I have a video on that, so if you go to that Silence Do Good in YouTube, you'll find that. Or your body just simply destroys the cells, just nips a part of it and says, hey, I don't like this. I'm going to destroy that cell, and that would release some of the viruses. But either rupturing the cell or destroying the cell, you're going to create a weak spot in your respiratory lining and the barrier against the bacteria that sit there. Once the bacteria set up shop, you then find yourself getting worse symptoms. Why do some people just get the sniffles and a little cough? Well, because their body didn't destroy that many cells. Not that many cells ruptured. Not that many bacteria got into their intracellular areas or into their bloodstream. Those people who got terrible, yeah, you had a lot of bacterial invasion. Again, nose, mouth, lungs, all your body parts have bacteria naturally there. And it's okay that they're there, but they will become opportunistic pathogens, secondary pathogens. The door will be open and they will walk right through it. It took months, basically, until Mr. Trump got dexamethasone, which, by the way, is 7 times more potent than prednisolone or prednisone, much more than things like hydrocortisone. But dexamethasone, one of the most potent steroids out there, really nice, really safe. I use a lot of it in my practice. Then Mr. Trump also got antibiotics, monoclonal antibodies, antivirals, all sorts of stuff. And then that's when the rest of the doctors treating patients realized what I've been saying since February of 2020, and that is you need to be treated with antibiotics to prevent secondary infections. Physicians don't give antibiotics for viral infections. That's just what physicians do. That's what we were trained to do as veterinarians. Oh, if it's a viral thing, if you suspect it's a viral thing, don't give antibiotics. Well, guess what? My patients get anti-inflammatories and get antibiotics. You got a little tiny sniffle and your cat's still eating and drinking, maybe I just give you some steroids. If your animal is not feeling good, coughing, and off its food, its eyes are swelled up, well, you're getting antibiotics too, because I'm not going to let a secondary bacterial infection hurt your pet. The other thing I've been saying is you need to be treated with anti-inflammatories. Well, why? Well, because the airways are being destroyed. They're getting inflamed. It was stupid that they didn't, plain and simple, that they didn't use steroids from day one. Let's see. So that's the basic anatomy physiology lesson. In some severe infections, we need to be treating for secondary infections or systemic inflammation. Here's an example. It's like taking an aspirin for a fever when you have the flu. All right, you got the flu, so you're puking or you have diarrhea, but you have a fever. Well, you're taking the aspirin not for the GI trouble, you're taking it for the systemic inflammation created and the pounding headache. So the virus destroying cells creates systemic inflammation, so you take an anti-inflammatory. It's just plain old stupidity that they were not using steroids in the first place. Steroids are easy and they're cheap. Now here's the research lesson. Going back to that information from India. Here's the only way a study to test if ivermectin would be effective against COVID. And so raise your hand if you want to participate. Listen first, and then you can see. First, you take a large group of people, a few hundred people, a few thousand people, maybe more. You take a large group of people who have not had the disease. To be sure they haven't, you got to make sure you test their blood. We got to have a blood test to show if they've had COVID or not. If they have had COVID, they would already have protection against the disease and not be susceptible. So you can't be in this study if you've already had the disease, okay? Because you already have antibodies, which means you are going to not be susceptible or recover a heck of a lot faster than anybody who hasn't had the disease. Also, you can't be a part of the study if you've already been vaccinated. All right, so there you have it. You got to have somebody who's naive, that doesn't have the disease, never had the disease, has never been vaccinated for the disease, and you have to test for the fact that they haven't had it, because even if they had mild symptoms, they would still have antibodies, okay? So, yeah, so again, anybody who's been vaccinated cannot be part of the study either. Keep on reading. Then again, if you have a test that shows you've had the disease, you know who also wouldn't need ivermectin therapy. Still reading? Okay, there you go. All right, so now you give them all COVID, and yes, you give them COVID on purpose. Every single person in that study. You give exactly half of them ivermectin. You don't tell them who you're giving it to. You actually don't even tell the doctor who's prescribing it or administering it to them. You don't tell anybody anything. You just say this many participants is half, and these ones are going to get ivermectin, and only one person knows, and that way then everybody stays in the dark, and then you give the other group, the control group, nothing at all. You don't give anything to anybody after that, no matter how sick they get. No, they don't get antibiotics. They don't get anti-inflammatories. Yeah, I know I said everybody should get it, but I'm just telling you, if you want to do a study on ivermectin or any other drug out there, this is the only way that you can test it for sure. This is how science is supposed to work. So no matter how sick they get, you don't give them anything, so you can compare exactly what happens when ivermectin is present or absent. All right? Some people come out with the sniffles. Some people come out dead. But that's the study, okay? Because you got to look at the control group to say, all right, well, 40% of people just got mild symptoms. 20% of the people got moderate symptoms, and the rest got severe. All right, well, now you've got a control group that says that's what I would expect if I'm going to expect 60 or 40, 40, 20, 40 on my mild, moderate, severe. Then I know my test group, if I get variation from that, then I know the ivermectin's actually done something. Does that make sense? But that would be the study. So let me ask you this. Anybody want to sign up? Again, you don't get anything until your symptoms are over or until you're dead. That's the way the study goes. That's the only way to know for sure. Because let's face it, we're not comparing apples to apples here. We're doing way more things to help people out, and not everybody's getting dexamethasone. Some people are getting prednisolone. Not everybody's getting a Z-Pack. Some people are getting some other antibiotic because they can't tolerate the Z-Pack. So it's not fair to make a blanket statement saying anything about it without truly having the proper data for it. And it's the control group basically that's missing from all the current quote-unquote studies and trials, from information, not data, collected about ivermectin, vaccines, masks, etc. So you don't have a control group, any of this stuff, and if you don't have a control group, then you can't publish it. You can't definitively say that any one thing is better than any other one thing because you're just not having the data presented to you. So again, nobody wants to do this because nobody wants to be a victim, and rightly so. So I don't blame anybody. But that would be the study to compare ivermectin alone on a naive infection of COVID-19. But that is not what they're doing in India. In India, they don't test everyone to see who has antibodies to COVID and therefore has already had the disease. So number one, they're not testing people. What they're doing is giving everyone ivermectin. If you don't have any symptoms, they're giving you ivermectin and saying it's prophylactic. If you are symptomatic, then they're testing you and saying, okay, are you positive or are you negative? Doesn't matter, you're still getting ivermectin too. They're all also likely getting antibiotics and steroids because let's face it, there's a ton of meds made for cheap over there, and everybody deserves to live, so why the heck not? Here in the United States, oh well, yeah, we should have been doing the same thing. The meds are still not very expensive over here either, but everybody should have been getting meds this whole time in mild, moderate, or severe cases. I look, man, I don't want to be even having the sniffles for a day. If I got the sniffles for 2 days, if I start coughing, you better give me something because I really don't want to have chest congestion. That's a terrible thing, even if it's not COVID-19. So almost assuredly, they're also all getting antibiotics and steroids for moderate to severe cases. They in India are not doing a research study. What they're doing is being good human beings. They're taking every opportunity to save their fellow humans. So not for 1 second should anybody look at that information and go, oh, they're trying to advance science. No, they're trying to prevent their families and friends, their fellow humans, their fellow country people. They're trying to protect them from being hurt or dying. And rightly so. Okay? Now, but that doesn't mean that ivermectin has anything to do with their lower morbidity or mortality. Morbidity meaning how much you're suffering, or mortality rates, which means how many people are dying. It too is not a controlled study, and it will never be peer reviewed and fully published that way. It'll just be a notation. It'll be information. It won't be an actual study that we can say definitively any one thing about the ivermectin. So you can't use the data as a tool to study ivermectin, but if they use the meta-analysis, I guarantee they will. I guarantee they will, because they just want to gather any bit of information to support what they're trying to sell, and that's the notion of ivermectin. So first, from Petri dish studies and known bioavailability, which means how many oral milligrams you take makes a certain concentration in the bloodstream, it is definitive the dose that we currently use is not high enough to affect the virus. And secondly, the India information, it's not data because they're not doing a scientific research study, is not valid because they don't have control untreated groups for comparison. Everyone is comparing what information we get from ivermectin, vaccines, masks, and so forth to what happened before anybody got medicine for their illnesses. And that's not fair or accurate. It's not science. It would never get published in a peer-reviewed journal. And why is that so important? Because I'm a science guy, I'm a former researcher, and that's what you want to see. When you have this stuff published in a peer-reviewed journal, then you can make a final assessment and say, this is going to work. All the drugs that do save our lives, all the drugs that help us with cancer and things like that, yeah, they are part of these peer-reviewed published studies. That's why we use those drugs, because we know that they work and how they work. Hundreds of papers are submitted and accepted every year, but not one article has been published on the effectiveness of any of these modalities in vivo, because there's no controlled study. We don't have anything to show things like this. Where's my hang on a second here. I can't find what I'm looking for, otherwise I'd highlight it so I don't have to say it. But anyway, yeah. So if I could find it, then I would say the same thing. But as far as ivermectin goes, that there's no controlled studies, so there's no way to publish anything on the effectiveness of these modalities. But I've shown you 3 articles, 1 review. It cites these 2 other articles and shows that it has to be at least 1 micromolar or more. 1 micromolar or more actually does kill your normal healthy cells. And then 1 micromolar, in order to make the body achieve that, if you're just taking the regular anti-parasitic dose, you're fold too low, 29 times, up to 29 times too low. And that's not to say that if you took 29 times the amount, first of all, that it would be safe, because I guarantee it wouldn't. But second of all, that your blood would even achieve the proper milligram per liter micromolar dose that it would take to then mimic the Petri dish studies. You are not a Petri dish. Please do not self-medicate. And then the real reason I have to publish this is that currently, like I said, I'm having a hard time getting ivermectin to treat very specific skin diseases in dogs. Mange, demodectic mange, it's not the end of the world. So if your dog gets mange, it's not the end of the world. Believe me, it is treatable. I've treated over probably 450 cases now in the past 13 years, and every single one has cured. Sometimes it takes 3 to 4 months to get them fully cured, but that should resolve that problem. But I need the ivermectin, and I need the folks in India to make more of it, so I can use more of it. I need them to stop giving it to their humans because it's not doing anything for them. But I mean, I hate to be a dope about it, but I want my fellow humans to be healthy, but I want my patients to be cured of their illnesses even more. I got into the world of veterinary medicine because I want to save lives in the animal world, and animals can die of mange. They can die of heartworm disease. They can die of parasitic diseases as well, intestinal diseases, lung diseases that we need ivermectin for. So, bottom line, ivermectin is not effective at neutralizing viruses in vivo. There is no evidence of that. There's no proof of that. And just because something works on a petri dish doesn't mean it will ever make it into in vivo real life studies. And the bottom line is the doses that you would have to use would be extremely toxic to human beings. But it is very effective at curing my patients. So that's that. Anyway, so just ignore the S's on here. So hopefully that resolves that for you. If anybody has any questions, you can certainly just post something, and maybe I'll take a look at the comments. If you don't like the video, then you should have stopped watching it a long time ago. Hopefully that educates you. If you're somebody who is on the fence about it and saying, I'm not really sure if ivermectin actually works, and you're on the fence about the masks and you're fence about the vaccines, and you just don't know, well, you're not alone out there. A lot of people don't know, and that's just not fair. It's talk about misinformation. They need to give us cold hard facts. That you want everything that you can get, to be treated, to be safe, and to be healthy. But first and foremost, You come down with COVID-19, I don't care what variant it is, you demand antibiotics and steroids. You come down with any other just respiratory thing, you're sneezing or coughing so hard you're sneezing out blood or coughing up blood. I don't care if you're negative for that disease. If you are moderate to severe, you tell them I want some antibiotics and steroids. You tell them Silence Dogood said it ain't gonna hurt me, it's only gonna help me, and that's the fact. You deserve it. We want everybody to stay healthy. I like these folks in India who are using every medicine they've got to help these people out, and they've seen far reduced morbidities and far reduced mortalities, some of the lowest we've seen. I mean, they're talking about hundreds of thousands of people in these states or provinces out in India that they're doing this in, and that's pretty outstanding. But we already knew that. We already knew that giving steroids and antibiotics was going to help, but by God, we just need to be using it more here in the United States. So get on your doctors, get after them, and tell them, hey, this is what I want. Just because you think that they're a doctor and you think they should know, look at the information. They could gather the same information, the same conclusions that I'm doing right now, but they're not. They're just listening to what they're told to do. They're just doing what the government says they should do and what medical people tell them that they should do. But I'm telling you, get treated. Don't be a statistic. All right. When people out there are dealing with a lot of mental health issues, a lot of people are lonely and they've got families that are right under their noses and live with them and love them, but yet their hearts still hurt. We've all got issues, but this is important to me that everybody become educated and everybody has the information they need to make good decisions, and they can help themselves with this information. So for anybody who thinks that ivermectin works, I'm glad that you think it does, because on a petri dish it does, but it's not been proven in humans, and you can't get the dose high enough in humans safely to be effective. For anybody who is wondering if ivermectin works, no, it doesn't work in a human, and it's not going to be working in a human. And for anybody who already knew this, then congratulations. You're just as smart as everybody else now. So that's it. I wish you guys all well. Be safe, be healthy. Again, remember that people do care out there. You may not feel it, you may not know it, you may not see it. I'm just a stranger, and maybe I'm just a strange person in a strange world, but many times I feel like I don't fit in. Many times I don't feel like the world is turning the same direction as everybody else. I often feel like I'm on a desert island and I'm surrounded by people that do care about me. And so don't think for a second that just because I have an education, just because maybe I make more money than you, maybe you look at this video and you go, holy crap, this guy knows a lot of stuff. Well, I do, and a lot of it's just self-educated. Wasn't born with or taught all this stuff. I had to read the articles myself, but at the end of the day, I need love too. You need love too, and there's people out there that care. And I'm doing this video. I'm doing these videos because I do care. So I want y'all to know that. Be safe, be healthy, make good choices, love yourself, love each other. Sometimes loving somebody else helps you love yourself too. So think about putting others before yourself, whatever your religion is or no religion at all. That true happiness, you will feel happy and you will feel healthy and you will feel better about the world as it runs today. If you make somebody else happy, your heart will grow, and in that growth, then you will grow inside of yourself as well. So be good to each other, folks. Lots of love.